Nigerians have been reacting to the comments of Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai, who berated governors from the southern part of the country over open grazing. El-Rufai says the governors are politicizing the issue, and the governors have passed a law that they cannot enforce.
The Governors Forum has already taken a position that open grazing is not a sustainable way of livestock production, and we must move towards ranching. Okay, but moving towards ranching cannot be done overnight. We have to have a plan, we have to have resources, we have to implement it sensibly. It's not a matter of populist legislation or saying that tomorrow this or that. It's not the solution. We have taken a position as northern state governors and we're implementing that. And in my state, for instance, we are developing a huge ranch at Damao where we'll sedentarize the herders. And that's the solution long term. But can it be done overnight? No. This project we are doing will cost us about 10 billion naira. The CBN is supporting us with about 7.5 billion. And it will take about 2 years to do. We will be settling 1,500 Fulani herder families and hope that they will see that there are alternative ways of producing livestock instead of running up and down with cattle and going into people's farms and causing all kinds of problems. So we want to solve the problem. What is unhelpful is to politicize a situation and pass legislation that you cannot implement. So we have taken a position and we are working round the clock to implement that position. That is the solution. Legislation, you can legislate. Let's wait and see. I wish them all the best of luck.
All right. Well, earlier, the chairman of the Southern Governors Forum and Ondo State Governor Rotimi Akeredolu gave Arise News his thoughts on the comment made by Kaduna State Governor El-Rufai. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I listened to my brother Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State. I heard all he said. And I am not surprised. Somebody we have interacted for quite a while, so I'm not surprised at his utterances. It's all right by him. The important thing is this. We have never at any point in time tried to talk to other states. We have more or less restricted ourselves to taking, that is what we are going to continue to do. What other support through CBN? Fantastic. This is not something that all of us can get, but it's all right. He's having it, so he's happy about it. But I can assure him of one thing. There's no politics about anti-open grazing law. What politics? We say people are destroying the livelihood of our own people, and we say we are not going to allow it to continue. And it's certain. If he says it's a law we cannot enforce, let him wait. Or let him bring his others here. They will go back to inform him whether or not we're able to enforce the laws. He will get to...
All right, Tundu, a lot of back and forth. What's your take on this?
Well, on the face of it, it would appear that there's a consensus across the country that open grazing is no longer sustainable and the time for ranching is here. But then there's a disturbing undertone in the comments by Governor El-Rufai, some kind of dog whistle. What on earth does he mean when he says the law, the anti-grazing, open grazing laws in the South cannot be enforced? Is he trying to invite herders to flout those laws? What does he mean by that? He has no business making such a statement at all. And it just seems to be this recurring theme of the North expecting the South to kowtow. Anytime Southerners try to take their destiny into their own hands and enact legislation as has been done, it's not populist, actually. It's purely pragmatic. The job of the governors is to secure the lives and property of their citizens. What is populist about that? Anytime there's any kind of a move, the North seem to say, well, we agree in theory, but. Why must there be a but? Why? That is the undertone that I feel that Governor Akeredolu is addressing when he says that Governor El-Rufai is trying to export banditry. That is, for me, is what is disturbing. And I really do wish people would desist from making these unnecessary statements.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I don't think that conflict, the rhetoric of conflict, of hate, of dissension, of difference is necessary. But this is what you get, in Nigeria, where the North-South divide is very strong, ethnic politics is strong, and also somewhere in there is primordial, sentiments between both parts of the country. Now, if indeed it is true, as Governor El-Rufai pointed out, that the northern governors have agreed that open grazing is not something that you can sustain, but that it's better to do ranching. He even on one occasion had said that his own state will require over 100 billion naira to be able to set up, ranches, and that he was ready to convert, territories for ranching. Then, of course, his objection was a bit slightly overstated because there seemed to be a certain meeting of minds, both between the southern governors and some governors in the north. Wasn't it even Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State and Governor Masari of Katsina State, who both, in giving guidelines to ensure enhanced security, improved security in their state, said there should be no open transportation of cattle from the north to the south. At least two governors in the north decided on that, which means that they themselves see a connection between the challenge of insecurity and, open grazing of cattle. However, in this particular case, he said two things. He says the laws are not sustainable as passed by some of the states in the south. Lagos, Osun, Ondo, quite a number of states have already passed that law, anti-open grazing law, in order to meet the deadline of September 1, which was again reiterated at the last meeting of the southern governors in Enugu. Okay, has he studied those laws? Has he taken a look at the details for him to know, whether what is being proposed is sustainable or not? The only extrapolation that he's making is about costs, right? So does he really know what the plans are in the various states in the south? And that's why I think, those who have reacted, and it's not only Governor Akeredolu of Ondo State, reactions came from the governor of Delta State, Senator Okowa, from the governor of Osun State, Governor Oyetola, from Ohaneze Ndigbo, and also from Akeredolu. But the Akeredolu comment has been played up because he's the chairman of the Southern Governors Forum. And El-Rufai has been accused of playing to the gallery. He's, being accused of being the one that is playing politics. What we would like to see, is better, communication, among the governors, north or south, and no attempt to either reduce this to the politics of region or the politics of difference that we have in the country. But as for El-Rufai saying, yes, it will take time. Yes, it's a process, but you have to start it. But at the level of principle, the 17 southern governors have said, this is where we stand in this matter. Do they have the right to speak on behalf of their people? Yes, they do. Does El-Rufai have the right to also defend the interests of the people that he serves? Yes, he does. But all parties concerned must watch their rhetoric, because we can't have a situation where persons who are in positions of leadership are the ones setting bad examples and, widening the politics of division.
All right, well said, Dr. Batiantundu. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus Sudiri, Michael Wilson, Adeso Moro, and Aaron Akejola to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Sudiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Focus on Nigeria today. We'll start off with the Senate approving 2022 fiscal year 2022 budget benchmarks. This, of course, following the 2022 through 2024 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, which is just a whole lot of jargon about basically what the federal government expects to pull through in the fiscal year 2022. So, first off, as far as revenue, federal government has revenue projections of 8.3 trillion naira for fiscal year 2022. Also, as far as expenditure is concerned, 13.9 trillion naira in expenditure. That gives you a deficit of 5.62 trillion naira. which means more borrowing is going to be on hand in fiscal year 2022. There's also, we did this, of course, the budget year is now moved to January through December, and, they're pretty early as far as the presentations on appropriation bills are concerned. Other projections, crude oil projection of 1.8 million barrels per day. Remember, yesterday we were talking about Timipre Silva and the federal government officially writing to OPEC to increase our quota so we can produce more. Benchmark oil price of $57 a barrel for Nigeria as far as fiscal year 2022. Exchange rates of 410, which is the official rates on the I&E window. Have to see how things work out there for 2022. And GDP growth of 4.2%. 4.2% projection for 2022. And inflation of 13%. Of course, we're at 17.01% right now. So again, when these projections are made, you wonder if they were run by the Presidential Advisory Council. Just of notes here, revenue projection is 8.3 trillion, right, for fiscal year 2022. The projection for 2020 was 5.3 trillion naira, of which Nigeria only realized 3.4 trillion, so only about a 63-64% performance. So, of course, there was COVID and all that other stuff, but you have to wonder how Nigeria hopes to realize this 8.36 trillion naira figure for fiscal year. But by and large, that's the process that's been pushed through. Now, as the senators were debating this, Senator Solomon Olamilekon, who is the chair for the Senate Committee on Finance, of course, they mentioned the revenue, then they mentioned expenditure, then of course, the deficit came up, and then one other senator was mentioning the fact that, look, we're borrowing again, where's all this borrowing going to? And then Senator Olamilekon said that, well, we are here because of prior administrations. Doctor, it'd be interesting to get your take on this. He said, dating back to the military era, the debts that the Buhari administration is paying off now is being blamed on prior administrations, although, there was the Paris Club payoff. So, not sure where Senator Olamilekon is coming from, but then it is an election year, is it not? To FAC, Federal Accounts Allocation Committee, the amount of what was shared in August fell by about 8.3% to 696 billion naira. There wasn't a reason given as to the drop in FAC allocations. It was 760 billion naira that was shared to the three tiers of government in July. Now, of course, since the whole VAT brouhaha, everybody's parsing through VAT numbers whenever the FAC numbers come out. So gross revenue from VAT did increase. It jumped by 18% from July to August. So gross revenue from VAT was about 178 billion in August from 151 billion in July. Senate President Ahmed Lawan, he also, as they were deliberating, budgets and FAC and everything else that I was talking about, he did say that he supports the federal government still collecting VAT until the Supreme Court has ruled on what happens between river states and the federal government. Move to oil and gas. Mele KYARI, Group Managing Director of the NNPC, was on Bloomberg TV yesterday. He was talking about how the gas crisis that's taking place, affecting the UK and other European nations, could actually add, I think he said, another $10 per barrel or so to crude oil prices, with people, having to switch to alternative forms of power. So that could go to crude prices, $10, an extra $10 over the next 3 months or so. But, we mentioned this yesterday when we talked about the fact that NLNG was saying that the domestic capacity of Nigeria to absorb what they can put out, 450,000 metric tons of gas, is not there. And you look at this again, so the same conversation continues. The gas crisis, Nigeria should be benefiting from that. Unfortunately, we're not. And even this projected increase in crude, because we're at $74 a barrel, we're still not able to realize the revenue that we can from there because of the OPEC cuts and also technical issues with our reservoirs and so on and so forth. But that's generally our African business update for today.
Rotus, just looking at the budget, I am sad already for next year because we'll have to borrow again. You see, I think it is time to start cutting our coat according to our cloth. I don't see the reason for a 13 trillion budget you cannot fund. If the revenue projection is 8 trillion, why can't we have a budget cap? Maybe for the next 5 years. Because you see, we keep borrowing to fund the deficits. Isn't it time to have a cap based on what we can afford? Because when you look at it, what do we spend the budget on? Under recovery or subsidy. That takes a big portion that goes out of our revenue. And that's why here, we need to have the conversation. We need to remove subsidy. It's not sustainable. A lot of that revenue is being frittered away due to frivolities. You talk about the borrowing for capital projects, where you can implement an Orosoye report and reduce personnel costs. So a lot of that money is being frittered away in bureaucracy. I think it's time for us to have a budget cap and only spend what we can earn. That's just it. I don't believe in a 13
To be fair, Rufai.
Yes. Go ahead, Rotus.
Just to be fair, I mean, the United States, the Democrats just increased the debt ceiling over in this. So this isn't unique to Nigeria. I mean, budget caps, yeah, we have the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which as far as the percentage of the deficit we can allow, we've breached that. So it's not just Nigeria, just to be fair, because the Democrats in the US just increased their debt ceiling.
You are talking about an America that can get over 1.2 billion or trillion from payroll taxes alone. How much you get in payroll taxes here? You are talking about a China that can get 3.2 billion from SME taxes alone. You can't compare with an America. We should cut our cut according to our size. It is what we can afford, we should do at this time, and remove all those leakages like subsidy and the likes. Let's not compare ourselves with America.
Well, two quick things. The Senate Committee Chairman on Finance, Senator Adeola, and also the Senate President, Dr. Lawan. Yes, both of them were saying, well, if we have a debt burden in Nigeria and we have a debt service to revenue ratio of 97.7, this is because past governments, from Obasanjo to Musa Yar'Adua to Jonathan, borrowed, and that 3/4 of the debt stock of Nigeria is inherited. Well, the only unfortunate thing is that both gentlemen did not provide the facts in this regard. They've included Obasanjo's administration in it, and that was the administration that negotiated the debt write-off for Nigeria. They were saying also, both of them, that previous administrations did not invest in critical infrastructure. Isn't it the case that the present administration has continued from where, other administrations left off? And we can just quickly look at a few projects. The railway project, you can date the framework all the way back to the Obasanjo administration. Is that not what they too have taken further beyond where President Jonathan left off? The Sovereign Investment Authority, that they're using to drive investment and infrastructure, wasn't that established by previous administrations? The second Niger Bridge, wasn't something that they also inherited. The railway, so when the two of them talk about critical infrastructure, they have been very economical with the truth. The other thing, of course, is that government is a continuum. And one of the things we've said positively about the Buhari administration is that the Buhari administration did not abandon projects that it inherited. It continued with them. And we're expecting that by the end of the tenure of that administration, it will have been able to do a lot more in terms of delivering on those projects. But the problem we have is that even when serious issues are being discussed, the tendency, for a segment of the political leadership is to blame previous administrations for what has happened in Nigeria. And the riposte to that is that, look, the APC government came to power in 2015. They promised change. Nigerians don't want excuses. Nigerians want results. They want government to serve the interest of the people. As far as the ordinary people are concerned, this person borrowed money, that government borrowed money. The question is, what have you done with money that has been borrowed? What is the impact on the people? Except you have concrete facts. Then, of course, all those statements that the two of them were making yesterday were just purely partisan. And the concern about this administration is that there's been excessive borrowing. Borrowing that is unsustainable. I think Dr. Doyin Salami, who is also their lead economic advisor, talked about how some of the steps that have been taken are unimplementable. Can we have a conversation around that instead of blaming, our previous governments? Because I don't think that rhetoric will work when the legacy of this administration is to be constructed. Yes, the point about the 2022 budget proposals. Well, haven't we seen it before? Every year there's always that disconnect. Capital expenditure is higher than, revenue. Even the revenue, where is it going to come from? And how did they calculate GDP growth of 4.2%? That's not the projection we have from, the Bretton Woods institution. And there are no indications within the economy that we can achieve that 4.2%, either in the first quarter or second quarter of 2022. And even if we do, that's not enough. Our projection, what Nigerians will need for us to make significant progress, is a double-digit GDP growth. So some of these issues is what I think we should focus upon. So this budgeting process has become a ritual. There will be no difference. It will still be a deficit budget.
Right. The senator you were referring to earlier, Rotus, is Senator Gabriel Suswan, the former governor of Benue State, who expressed his objections to the increasing borrowing and also raised the point about Nigeria dishing out over 2 trillion naira in import waivers while we have a 5.6 trillion naira deficit. Can you make sense of that? And in fact, the Minister of State for Budget and Economic Planning last month actually said Nigeria has lost 5 trillion naira to open-ended import waivers. Try and make sense of it if you can, because I can't.
No, nobody can. And just to set the facts straight, Rotus, let's deal with facts. The debts under Goodluck Jonathan, look for the facts, were less than $10 billion. Now we have grown the debt to over $30 billion. The debt under Goodluck Jonathan was less than $10 billion. Now we have grown it to under $30 billion.
No, 33 billion.
$33 billion. 33 billion. That means we have taken over 13 billion or more, 20 billion in debt. The debt under Goodluck Jonathan was less than $10 billion. Now it's $33 billion. Well, those are the facts for you.
It had been a while since we heard that thread. Since we had that threadbare phrase, 16 years of PDP misrule. So it did have to rear its head again every so often. Well, thank you, Rotus, for your time this morning. Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. A little bit of hawkishness from the Fed yesterday, and everybody's waiting on Evergrande, really. So those two things, actually, defining how the markets are reacting today. Evergrande shares in Hong Kong surged more than 10% when their CEO said, and I'll quote this, said the firm's top priority is to help wealth investors redeem their products. And he said also that the scheduled repayment for Monday, which was a domestic one, has been all resolved. So it's $83.5 million due today. I've been just looking quickly at the wires before I came on, and I haven't found any notice of that. And then on the 29th, the further $47 million. So basically, people actually took what the markets took what the CEO of Evergrande actually said to be the truth, that they were actually going to do something about it. And Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose about 0.5%, and the shares in the company itself, Evergrande, rose, as I said, 10%. Other Hong Kong listed Chinese property companies also up, as was HSBC. So a lot of people have been, wondering if this is we talked about it yesterday on the program, didn't we, about whether this is Evergrande's Lehman moment. I don't think it is. I think that Lehman was about financial products. This is about property, and there's still the land. This is what people are actually saying, and I'm indebted to the IMF, in fact, no less a body, for actually saying that. Will there be a bottomless pit to which this money is actually comes out of from the Chinese state into Evergrande? Very, very likely. The International Monetary Fund chief economist Geeta Gopinath, she said to Reuters, China has the tools and the policy space to prevent this turning into a systemic crisis. Well, shares of Chinese estates up 15%. That's a big holding company in China, because it said that it might think about dumping Evergrande's shares. So there's lots of different things circling all this. And I don't think the Chinese authorities will allow it to become a systemic crisis. But we have to hope that they don't. No, they do rather, and get into their state coffers and pull this out. So as far as the US is concerned, I mentioned right at the beginning that Jay Powell came across quite hawkish actually yesterday. If progress continues broadly as expected, the committee judges a moderation in the pace of asset purchases may soon be warranted. That is the clearest indication that that the asset buying is going to be tapered, and that the number of FOMC members, again, I'm looking at the numbers here, saw a potential rate rise in 2022 increased from 7 in June now to 9 of them. So we're getting a feeling really of where the Fed's actually going with this. Tightening is coming, but we're not quite sure where. But it is actually more hawkish than it used to be. It's also apparently evaluating whether or not to launch a digital currency and in what kind of form. No details, no dates, no detail about it. But Jay Powell said that they were actually looking to do that, excuse me, along with a lot of other central banks around the world. President Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron from France are meeting to try to smooth things over about the great submarine saga. Joe Biden spoke yesterday to the French president following that rather messy arms deal. And Macron has also agreed, get this is what diplomacy actually does, to send France's ambassador to the United States back to Washington next week. So they'll be making up fairly quickly, I would imagine. Bank of England meets today, as it does on its monthly meeting. Whether we'll see a change of stance or not quite sure about that. Lots of things actually going on, as you know, which I brought to you about the crisis facing this country and energy and so on. Whether that will be against having a rate rise or not, we'll have to see. I don't think there'll be a rate rise today, but we might just get another bit of information about where the bank stands on the whole of the economy. A bit more candour would be grateful. We'd be grateful for that, like we got it from the Fed. The energy crisis in this country, in the UK, claiming 1.5 million customers. They're not without gas or electricity. That's down to Ofgem, the regulator, to decide who will actually take on them as their companies go bust. The smaller ones go bust. Ofgem says it's our number one priority is to protect customers. But the fact of the matter is that people will be paying more for their energy as fewer firms compete for them. Oil prices surged overnight and in Asia trading too, after US inventories fell by 3.5 million barrels. That's pushing up actually. Brent's up to 75, WTI up to 71. We're moving out of that, that sort of sweet spot for the oil price right now. But again, things could change as they often do. And as far as gold's concerned, it got a bit of a push down, really. It went lower because of the FOMC getting slightly tighter and Evergrande as well.
Okay, Michael. Real quickly, is this not a case of the Chinese bubble has burst? The real estate sector in China used to push growth. In fact, took about 29% of the GDP in China. Anytime you see big GDP growth in China, it's the real estate sector. Evergrande has built over 90 homes for 90 million people, and there are no people to fill those homes. That's the problem on ground. So the bubble has burst. Isn't this time for China to come out and say the truth that the real estate bubble, it had boasted about all this while, has burst, and it should face the problem? Because the problem, Evergrande will not get out of it. 90 million homes. Michael, you can fill people. The homes Evergrande have now in China that people can't fill up, you can fill the population of Britain and a couple of other European countries in there, and you still have some spare room space. That's how humongous the problem is. Is it time for China to tell the truth?
What is that word you just used then? Truth? Did you say truth? Did you say international politics and truth? Did you mix those two words with that? Did you mix that word with that phrase? I don't think so. I don't think we're ever going to get the truth about what happens. What is happening in China is that they're trying to stop it turning into a systemic crisis. And they've got the IMF behind them, who believes that they have the tools to do that. No, we'll never get the truth about what goes on. We'll get some kind of accommodation, I would imagine. It won't, it may spill out, but as you've seen this morning, it only takes words, some palliative from some CEO of Evergrande to say, oh, it's all under control, and shares go up again. I mean, I share your complete cynicism about the whole thing. It's a dreadful mess, but the Chinese authorities daren't do anything apart from stop it becoming a systemic crisis. How they do that, I suspect they'll probably spend a lot of their money.
Well, you are quite right, Michael. I mean, how to prevent a financial system crisis in China. But okay, on was it yesterday when Evergrande met with the bondholders? That was the basis for the shares improving in Hong Kong, first by 20%, and then it stabilized at just a little above 10%. Is that necessarily a positive development? Are we likely to see some kind of changes again, or cause for nervousness, anxiety on the part of investors after the payment of the 35.9 million, to domestic bond holders? And then as for the U.S., that UK-US military pact, well, President Biden has spoken with President Macron, who's been throwing tantrums over the fact that, they were excluded from the talks, and, France is going to incur losses, and with Scott Morrison and Liz Truss talking about strategic national interests being more important. France, before now, asked for compensation. Apart from the discussions, and Prime Minister Johnson speaking a combination of French and English that may not make sense to Macron. Would there be an agreement? Is it possible that France will be compensated by all the parties involved?
Right, so I'd like to be an international lawyer that took on the case for compensation for France, which, as it happens, we looked at it yesterday. The problem about the contract was it was for the wrong sort of submarines. Not excusing what happened, but anybody looking at diesel-electric submarines is kidding themselves that that's the future. It's not. It's nuclear-powered submarines, especially for a place like Australia, which is surrounded by deep water. You want your submarines to disappear and to avoid detection. That's why you have nuclear-powered submarines. So I don't think the French are going to get any compensation for this. If they do, I would say it's pretty outrageous, because, as I understand it, the contract was also overspent and also running a lot behind time. I'm not making excuses. This is what actually happened. If the French had done it, if the French had been in a position to do it, they would have done it too. And as I said yesterday, they would have blamed it on Brexit. I think this is just international relations. I think what will happen and what should happen is that we need some reaching across the English Channel to France, putting our arms around them and saying, sorry about that, we'll try to do better next time. Now let's get back to normal, and let's begin to hate each other like we normally do, but let's pretend not to. That's the relationship that we have with France, and we're very, very happy with it. It's a beautiful country full of lots of very beautiful people, and we need to get together on that. That's my take on that. As far as Evergrande's concerned, all it's done is, as I understand it, it's just paid its domestic bond back. Its dollar bonds, which is a lot coming up, 83 million today. Again, I looked at the wires before I came on. I couldn't see any indication that the fact had paid that. And then 47 million of the dollar bond due on the 29th of September. I mean, we'll have to wait to see, but that'll be the crunch. It's not about meeting the shareholders and paying the domestic bonds. It's actually paying the dollar-denominated bonds, which is still, as I understand it, still yet to be paid. And there's a lot of it.
But the energy crisis in Britain, how worse can that get? I see that Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has shifted position a bit. The expectation was that it would be short-lived, it would be temporary. But now with two additional companies, total about 6 suppliers, more or less collapsing, he's now saying, oh, it may be, a long run. It may stretch out for a little longer. But in the final analysis, how bad can it really get? Particularly now that the elderly are looking up to government to do something about what looks like a coming chaotic winter in terms of energy supply?
We've moved a long way away from what this country used to be. There used to be something called capitalism. It looks like it's socialism, and it looks like every sector's got their hands out to the government for help because they're undergoing a crisis. I mean, Kwasi Kwarteng can say what he likes. The fact of the matter is that the government does not have an unlimited amount of money to spend on sectors which find themselves in difficulties. Whether or not there should have been a price cap or not on those energy prices, this is what they're really complaining about. Well, he pays your money. In our case, you takes your choice. I will be, and my wife and my friends will be paying a lot more for energy over this winter, one way or the other. Unfortunately, that's how it is. It's difficult, but I don't think the state, personally, I don't think the state should be responsible for something that the private companies allowed to happen. Even that it'll take pressure on Russia to release some more gas. They're being asked to do that. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that anybody in their right mind is actually thinking that Gazprom will say, oh yeah, of course you can have some more gas. No problem at all. I don't think they will. I think there'll be a lot of difficulty, and I think it'll last a long time.
I mean, and I can't believe the fact that the Conservative Party is acting so much like the Labour Party. I mean, this is what Labour Party is known for. I don't know. The Conservative Party has lost its identity to me. Thank you so much, Michael. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Moro joins us now. Morning, Adesua.
Well, good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu. And good morning, Dr. Bati.
Morning.
A bit of good news, perhaps, as the global coronavirus cases declined in the last week. According to the latest statistics and the data from the WHO as well as the Johns Hopkins University, about 3.6 million cases were reported in the last week from September 13th to 19th compared to the 4 million we saw in the previous week. This brings the cumulative number of confirmed cases and deaths globally to over 230 million and 4.7 million respectively. The regions of the Americas as well as Eastern Mediterranean, Southeast Asia and Western Pacific reported the highest decrease in weekly cases incidents. When it comes to deaths, unfortunately, the African and European regions remain unchanged in the case fatalities we're seeing from COVID. The world is also close to administering 6 billion doses, according to the Johns Hopkins University. At the moment, if you have it on your screen, it's 5.991 billion doses. Some other data are reporting 6 billion already. However, we're going with the Johns Hopkins University. World leaders have also been saying a lot regarding the vaccination exercise globally. We'll get to that in a bit, but in the meantime, let's look at the latest data coming out from Nigeria. Well, reported infections keep fluctuating in the country. It's 377 new infections in Nigeria. That's down from the over 500 reported the previous day. We also reported in the last 24 hours 2 COVID-19 related deaths. Lagos and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, posted the highest infections with 70 and 67 infections, respectively. A reminder, I can never get tired of saying this, that vaccination against COVID-19 is on the way in Nigeria. Vaccines are available. Vaccines are free. The vaccine is free. All you have to do is show up and get it in your arm. It is open to those age 18 and above in Nigeria at the moment. We've seen vaccine mandates coming into force in 3 states so far. The federal government says it is working on plans to enforce mandatory vaccines for federal workers in the country as well. Those are the latest figures on your screen, according to the NPHCDA. 4.1% of targeted population have received a dose, while 1.6% of the targeted population have been fully vaccinated. Now in Southeast Nigeria, Imo State to be precise, the Commissioner for Health in that state, Dr. Bartholomew Okorochukwu, is denying rumors that 37 persons died of COVID-19 in the Toli local government area of the state. He says the clarification became necessary based on news making the rounds that these 37 persons died in that area within the space of 1 week and that the area was in turmoil. Well, officially, according to the NCDC, I can tell you, Imo State has recorded 1,805 cases and unfortunately 40 people have lost their lives to the virus in the state. Away from Nigeria, we've heard a lot of bleak messages at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly, all the wrongs going on with the world, including the pandemic. However, yesterday, we heard some hopeful messages and even got new pledges to tackle the pandemic. Yesterday, at a virtual COVID-19 summit on the sidelines of the UNGA, U.S. President Joe Biden led the pack, announcing his country would donate 500 million more doses of the PFIZER vaccines to the developing nations by next year. The U.S. had already pledged 580 million doses, but delivered only 160 million of that pledge. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa was present at that summit. He was quick to remind the world leaders of the reality on the ground, reminding them that only 2% of the almost 6 billion doses administered globally have been administered in Africa. And he says this is despite the pledges and the targets by the world. Also, this U.S. pledge of more vaccines came on a day the U.S. FDA authorized a booster dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for those 65 and older, all people at high risk of severe diseases, and those who have jobs who expose them to the virus on a daily basis. They'll be getting booster shots in the U.S. at the moment, the Pfizer vaccine. And away from the U.S., Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro, is back home after the controversial and defiantly awkward opener and appearance in New York. But let me tell you, he's back home, but he's self-isolating and has cancelled a trip after his health minister tested positive for COVID-19 in New York and has had to quarantine in the U.S. Jair Bolsonaro, we know, has been against the science. He goes against the advice of his own COVID task team. So it makes you wonder how long he will self-isolate before he calls the next big rally or the next big crowd. Brazil's health regulator, Anvisa, is recommending that the entire presidential delegation to the United Nations General Assembly remain in isolation and undergo more tests.
Well, where do we start from? Let's start with Jair Bolsonaro. You recall that it was at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, and according to the roster, Brazil speaks after the UN Secretary General, and he delivered his address. But it was there, he had contact with his health minister, Marcelo Queiroga, who tested positive. But I think that what we've seen in Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro isolating is probably due to the influence of Anvisa, which is the regulatory body in charge of monitoring the COVID-19 situation. What Anvisa said is that the president should isolate along with every member of the delegation. And this weekend, we're told all of them will be tested. Although Jair Bolsonaro's spokesperson made it clear that the president, who had tested positive for COVID-19 in 2020 and recovered, is asymmetrical. In other words, he has no serious infection. But it's good to see for once, somebody like Jair Bolsonaro, who has been a very strong vaccine skeptic, even accepting to isolate. He had a meeting yesterday which was conducted virtually. So ordinarily, I didn't even expect that he will follow any scientific instruction. But let's see how that plays out. As for President Biden, yes, he had a meeting yesterday, as you said, in which he promised 500 million more vaccines. And he talked not just about global solidarity, countries of the world coming together. He also talked about global oxygen supply. He's also talking about the United States collaborating with Pfizer to see how pharmaceutical manufacturers, can license out their technology so that low and middle income countries can also set up manufacturing units. All of that sounds excellent on paper. About 1.1 billion vaccines now promised by the United States. But, the experts are skeptical. They are saying that, even what the president of the United States is promising does not go far enough, does not even come near the target of the World Health Organization. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says that by the end of this year, he expects that 40%, of the population of the world will have been vaccinated, and 70% by 2022. But his concern is that, look, yes, all these developed countries, they are making the promises, they're making pledges, but that those pledges are not ironclad. And that out of what had been promised from G7 to the European Union, only about 3 million doses, have been donated. And at the end of the day, continents like Africa, are short-served, which is also the position on Tuesday of the UN Secretary General, who said, yes, we've done well with science, but that it will give the developed countries of the world an F for ethics because of the inequities that we have in addressing the challenge of COVID-19, the pandemic. So the issue remains, in terms of whatever promises are made, the imbalance, the inequity, the injustice, and it's good to see world leaders like the Director General of the WTO, the DG of the WHO, and also the UN Secretary General, reminding the leaders of the world. But we just hope that the United States will succeed eventually in providing the leadership that it has promised.
Well, speaking of that, I'm going to use Rufai's favorite word, hypocrisy. You sound like Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof going on about mendacity. He does hypocrisy. And because just from what Dr. Abati just said about the inequity and the F grade that was given, I caught Dr. Anthony Fauci on US TV, NBC yesterday, talking about how going forward, the standard regimen for administering vaccines will be 2 shots for Pfizer and then a booster, or Johnson and Moderna, 1 shot and then a booster, although Johnson and Moderna is going to take a few weeks to confirm. So they are going full steam ahead with this selfish policy of booster shots when the whole world has not been fully vaccinated. It's just really quite astounding. And they're there making flowery speeches in the UN General Assembly. I mean, what's the point of all that?
I mean, let me piggyback on the word hypocrisy. Just like the hypocrisy when they changed their laws as regards, who can come into their country in the UK, and they push forward a very racist outlook, and they sort of mitigate the efficacy of the vaccines we take in Africa when they made those same vaccines. Hypocrisy, 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 hypocrisy. Pretty much beginning to look like a scene from, what's his name now? The frog.
It's Kermit.
Kermit the Frog.
Did you leave Kermit alone?
Kermit the Frog.
Don't join Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
I don't understand why he was trying to cast aspersions on Kermit the Frog.
Kermit the Frog, honestly.
Well,
Everybody
leave
leaves
Kermit.
Anyway.
Well, but I guess there will never be a time when there will be equality in the world, or fairness, or inequity. Because as we've seen in international politics, countries tend to look out first for themselves. They will reduce it to, strategic national interest. And that should be the big, lesson for developing countries, for African countries in particular, to know that you too must think in terms of strategic national interest. You plan long term. You look out for yourself. If you keep waiting for the UK or the US or the G7 or G whatever to come and solve your problems for you, you end up getting what Tedros Ghebreyesus is complaining about, tokenism. Until you wake up and our leaders wake up and manage our resources better to pursue national interests, we cannot, depend on aid and think that we will develop at the pace we seek.
That's the harsh truth.
I totally agree with all the concerns that have been raised. But, just to piggyback to what President Joe Biden said yesterday, that there's over 1.1 billion doses now equates to for every dose an American receives, 3 doses are now being sent globally. And of course, the debate about waning immunity, as with everything, charity begins at home, is what we are beginning to see with this pandemic. So if immunity is waning in their most vulnerable population, should they not vaccinate with booster shots? But again, this is the debate of the world. I totally agree with you guys.
In the spirit of transparency, Canada had 5 vaccines to 1 person, while Africa had none.
So much for Canada.
There's a lot
that
of
bastion of
a lot of
niceness.
stockpiles around the world.
Canada.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So soft.
All right, we need to go.